I know this is not the ending that you imagined. You wanted a real graduation, you wanted a real prom, you wanted pomp and circumstance, you wanted to shake hands, you wanted to get that diploma in person from your principal at Foley Field, getting up off those metal chairs. But unfortunately, this is the way it is. I remember 20 years ago, I graduated high school. I was in your shoes, walking into this whole new world. But 20 years gives you perspective. And so I wanted to use this time, and hopefully make it through the whole message, just to impart a few of the things that I've learned over the next 20 years coming from Bloomfield High School that maybe can help you on your way. One of the things, and this is pretty easy, is how to get to the top. It's really easy, actually. Stop climbing. If you stop climbing, you can't go any further. You're there. You're at the pinnacle, the zenith, the acme, the apex, whatever other synonyms you learned from your vocabulary tests. You can't go any higher if you stop climbing, right? Now, you may not have a mountain when you're done. If you stop climbing now, you probably have a sand dune, maybe, or a clump of dirt piled a few feet off the ground, maybe a few inches off the ground. But hey, you're at the top, right? We're not all climbing the same mountain. That's the reality. See, for someone, the top could be 10 flights of stairs. For somebody else, the top could be Kilimanjaro. For somebody else, the top could be Everest. And for someone else, it could be Mars. The trick is to keep climbing. And if you do that every once in a while, you'll look back and you'll be amazed how far you've come. That really is it. As long as you're climbing, you're growing. You're searching, you're seeking, you're finding. The people that you think you see at the top, they're not static, they're not stationary. They're always moving, they're trying to get better. They're evolving, they're learning, they're climbing. They want to see what's beyond the clouds. So how do you keep climbing? What drives you to not stop and to continue to climb? Well, the biggest thing really is to find inspiration, find a passion. And it shouldn't come from some speech from me. It shouldn't come from some quote that you saw on Instagram with a nice filter and a sunset. Find real inspiration, a real passion, because if you do that, you never really have to work hard. When I hear work hard, I'm confused because it's hard to work hard when you don't love something. Think of the classes that you worked the hardest in. Probably not your favorite classes, because the ones you liked, you were willing to do the work. So even if it was a lot, or if it was, if you want to say hard, you wanted to do it and you were willing to do it. When you find something you love, believe me, you'll put in the time, you'll put in the effort. You'll pay attention to the details, big and small, because you care. And when you care, it's not hard work. That's putting your soul into something. And over these next few years where you go to college or tech school or junior college or the real world, if you find something that moves your soul, if you find something that stirs your passions, then you found your calling. And you'll be successful because you'll get to do what you love. And while time, effort, dedication, all that will be required, not only will you want to do it, you'll be willing to do it. And I don't call that hard work. Part of finding your passion, too, is respecting the small tasks and the small jobs. A story for you. There was a silk merchant in Renaissance Italy, and he had commissioned a portrait of his wife. For the artist, it was a minor job. This artist had been commissioned by the Pope, the Duke of Milan, the King of France. So this wasn't a huge payday per day. But this artist loved his work, no matter how small or what the pay was. So in the course of perfecting this portrait, the attention to detail was uncanny. This artist would go down to the morgue, and he would get cadavers, dead bodies, and he would dissect them. And what he wanted to study was the face, and how the bones and the tissue and the tendons impact the smile or a frown just by moving them in a certain way. And in the portrait of Lisa Gherardini, the silk merchant's wife, we see this smile that is haunting yet inviting. In fact, it's the most famous smile in the work of art, and the portrait itself is arguably the most famous piece of artwork in the history of the world. If you go to Paris, you can see this painting hanging in the Louvre, or if you've read the Da Vinci Code, it's the painting that you see on the cover. Leonardo da Vinci was obviously the master painter there, and what separated him was curiosity, and that's something I want all of you guys to take with you. He found the extraordinary in the mundane. He looked at things and said, why do the waves move a certain way? In his notebook, there was a line where he says, describe the tongue of a woodpecker. Curiosity for curiosity's sake. If you look hard enough, ask questions, ask why, challenge accepted truths. Challenge your truth too. Don't be afraid to open yourself up to a new perspective. You may have to reshape your worldview. So what? That's how you grow. Go down rabbit holes. Play for birdie. So what if you bogey? There's always the next hole. Shoot for the moon. Even if you miss, you're amongst the stars. But be curious. Ask why. Ask questions. A lesson from Bloomfield High School. My 9th grade science teacher used to have in her classroom this little placard, and it had 3 words on it: adapt, migrate, perish. The rules of nature, right? But she forgot one, and that's evolve. And I think that's the most important one. Evolve as you go through life, especially college and the next 4 years for you guys. Evolve. Don't be the person you are now 4 or 5 years or 10 years from now. I'm going to go back to another art reference. Pablo Picasso, you guys have heard of him. One of his earliest works was painting of an old man. It was called Man in a Beret. If you look at it, it doesn't look like a Picasso. But that's where it started. And then he evolved. Blue period, rose period. Finally, he invented a genre and was part of, this movement, Cubism, with these geometric shapes and hard lines that was earth-shattering, that changed the entire world of art. He invented his own little genre. But in the beginning, it was Man in a Beret, which looks like a very standard painting of the time. I'll give you one that you guys probably know much better. Greetings from Asbury Park. It's Bruce Springsteen's first album. It's not his best. It's his first. And you see flashes in there. You see little sparks, potential. It's not quite the Born to Run album, but there's enough in there that's unrealized. And you guys have Greetings from Asbury Park within you. Can you go and find your Born to Run one day? So evolve and change. Finally, I know your generation gets picked on a lot. I'm technically the millennial generation, the one right before you. I hear what people say about you. You're all about you, self and selfies, who gets the most likes and shares and retweets. Your generation never had to worry about getting picked last in gym class. Your generation always got a trophy just for participating and showing up. Well, here's something to say to your critics. Your generation is tough. Your generation came into this world post 9/11. The world had changed. You didn't even have any idea. Your generation grew up with active shooter drills. When I was in high school, we had Jonesboro and Columbine, and it rocked our world. Couldn't even imagine before that somebody could come into a school with a gun and open fire. That was part of your normal when you went to high school. When you were in grade school, we had a devastating recession and housing crisis. It may have impacted your parents. You saw that, and you saw how they had to weather that and maybe take some lumps along the way. Here we are now with another global pandemic, another global downturn, a political arena that's polarized, divisive, and crass, and sometimes as hateful as it's ever been. But know that your generation is tough and it's adaptable. And as you embark on this next chapter of your lives, realize that your generation will be called upon. So I want you to be a generation that leads and blazes trails. Be a generation that stands up for others and stands up for the truth. Be a generation that represents what's right with humanity. Be a generation that shows compassion. Be a generation that's just better. Better than you were yesterday individually. Better than my generation is. Better than your parents' generation. Better than your grandparents' generation. Be the better generation. So congratulations. Go Bengals. And be the generation that not only makes our world better, but makes all of us better.